Morning all, welcome back to the channel. As promised, the time has come now to move on to try and offer up these shock absorbers. I've bought here on eBay 4 Bilstein original MX5 Mark II 2.5. These came off, mine's a 2.5 outside. Shock absorbers, 50 quid a piece. The mathematicians amongst you will have worked out they cost me 200 quid. That was delivered, so I didn't think that was bad. They're not in bad condition. Well, in fact, for second-hand shocks, and obviously OEM second-hand shocks, they're not in bad nick at all. So, following on from where we left off, what I've done temporarily, I'll just bring you over here and show you, just before turning the camera on, I've installed this steering rack, which is now a depowered steering rack. Listen to me like I know what I'm talking about. Well, I know it's a depowered steering rack because I'm the one that depowered it, having watched many episodes on YouTube of various people doing just that, over in the States in particular. So now it isn't power steering. It's not put together properly, this. So I'm going to remove it from the subframe shortly, off camera, take it over to the workbench, show you what I've done, and then we can assemble that, put the gaiters on. I've got some new gaiters on the bench. So we can assemble that and put it in position because it is obviously part of the front suspension. As you can see here, that's where we left off last time. So some more work to do here, offering up these front shock absorbers. I'll also go and get the banana bars I was referring to yesterday and show you what that means. This, you basically cut this out and put a banana bar in there, bolt it in to allow the shocks to fall into place. I think I'm going to have to do that, even if I throw away and replace those top suspension arms. I also had a problem with bolts. So those 2 bolts there, ironically, they're bolts that came off the dismantled donor MX5 and 2 washers that I happen to have in my collection. That side, by the way, with the sort of D-clamp on it is fine, but the 2 bolts that are supposed to go in there are over here. They came out of the subframe, that very subframe, and won't go back in again. I've cleaned out the threads as best I can. I've cleaned these bolts and lubed them up with everything from anti-slip. What am I trying to say? You know, the oil I was using yesterday. It's effectively copper grease, isn't it? Which is an anti-seize. Thank you. Getting my head together now. Yeah, an anti-seize. I then cleaned the anti-seize off and put on some cutting oil to see if that would help them go back in, and it won't. So I have measured them, and they are M12 bolts with a 1.25 pitch. That is a thread that I don't have either a tap or a die for, so I've ordered both. I've ordered a tap and a die. So I will remove these bolts, obviously, because we're going to take this over to the bench. Quite why those 2 bolts and washers fit when they're off the same car and they're M12s, and those 2 over there don't, is beyond me. But it might just be that the threads need cleaning out, so that's my plan. The reason this is bright orange is because the bodywork for this MEV Exocet, I'll stand over here and give you the best view there is at the moment. The bodywork for this MEV Exocet is in fact bright orange. Don't know what possessed me on the day I picked up the kit to, well, they delivered the kit, but on the day I bought the kit to choose bright orange, but I did. So there we are. So I think, moving on, I will put you on the tripod and explain what's going on with the steering rack, which I'll quickly whip off. There's only 4 bolts. I'll whip it off the car, take it to the bench, and then we can start to wrestle these shock absorbers into position. This is an already dismantled MX5 steering rack, and I've already depowered it. As I say, I'm not claiming any awards here. Basically, I've just followed the instructions of the guys that I watched on YouTube. What I'm also trying to do, given that I'm no Steven Spielberg, is create a place where I think you can see what I'm doing, and that should be in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to try and work towards that point so you can see what's going on. So in an attempt to explain what I've done, I'll put it back together loosely before giving it a clean, greasing it, putting it back together properly, and then fitting it to the car. So it might be helpful for someone who A, has dismantled it and doesn't know how it goes back together again, or B, I don't know, might be useful for someone. So let's have a go. So this, what I've done here, this is where all the hydraulic leads used to come into the powered steering rack. I've checked that things like that bearing are fine, and they are. It's not gritty, and I'll pack that all with grease before I rebuild it. But basically I've taken away the hoses and I've put back into the holes where the hoses were, I've put in bolts, and then I've cut those bolts off flush, and I've just sanded the top with an angle grinder. So that effectively, when I put the bolts back in, by the way, I put in permanent thread lock on them. So effectively I've sealed off those holes. Not really to stop any liquid coming out, because there's no longer any hydraulic fluid in here. It's to stop any detritus getting in. So if they're not 100% airtight, it's not the end of the world. I've done exactly the same thing. Oh no, that is where I did. Oh yeah. I've done exactly the same thing where the hoses and the pipes came out of the main body. I've explained why I've painted this yellow, orange, which may well have been a big mistake, but nevertheless, so that's why it's orange. I've done exactly the same thing here and then painted the orange over the top. So effectively now, there's no more hydraulic fluid going into the power steering. This is the rod, so it's the rack, I suppose, this being the pinion. Answers on a postcard if I've got that the wrong way around. But this had, in the centre here, it had a kind of big metal washer that went round that pushed the fluid left and right. When you turn the steering wheel to the left, it pushed the fluid to the left, and turn the steering wheel to the right, pushed it to the right, thereby assisting the steering. So hydraulic power steering. That's no longer needed, so I've removed it, as it suggests you do in the YouTube videos. So this can go back inside now to an unpowered rack. If you just disconnect the hydraulics and you don't take that washer away, and you leave the hydraulic fluid in the system, it can be quite stiff. So that's why I've done what I've done. All of this, I'm going to assemble it now, but I'll take it apart again and grease it up properly. But this basically goes back in here. So that is I guess the rack, which is not easy to get in. So that goes in there, and you can see the rack appearing inside the hole. The pinion then, which is this mechanism here with the holes bunged up, goes back inside there. Needs a bit of jiggery pokery to get it to go in. There we are. So even now you can see that will power the rack. Sorry, power the rack. It'll turn the rack. Turn that back round to the front. There's a little half round spacer there that drops in to stop, I think, the rack from turning, so that the gearing on the rack always faces the pinion. That's basically what that's for. And then once that's dropped in like that, you have a spring which provides tension. Oh, lost a little washer there. A washer, and then a locking mechanism. And this is actually two bolts. They're not in the first flush of youth, these, but they move smoothly together, and they're not binding, and I've given them a wire wheel. I'll give them another one before I reassemble it. That basically holds it in place. And then this is a lock ring. So the purpose of this is to set the tension on the rack and pinion. So if it's too loose, sorry, be here, wouldn't it? If it's too loose, you can tighten it. If it's too tight, you can slacken it. And when you've done that, it basically sets the tension on the rack and the pinion, and you're in business. I'm going to take that out before I lose it. Then the steering column attaches to the rack, so basically that fits on there, and then the bolt, I've got a bolt in it, which is why it won't slide on. That goes onto the spline and away to the steering wheel, and then on each end, move that to there, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. This screws, in fact I've forgotten something, there's a locking bracket which you bash down over the sides of the flanges here, look, on the track rod end. So that screws in there and is finding it, there we go, we're in. So that screws in there, and then when it's all the way in, get out of your way, that screws in there like that. Not easily, it would seem. Come on. No, it won't go. So let me try the other end. Pretty much exactly the same thing going on. It just needs a bit of patience, and there's no need for you to stand around watching me struggle. Yeah, straight in with that one. So that's one end. This goes in exactly the same. That's the lock nut for there. That should have gone on first. Sorry, beg your pardon. So that goes in to hold the rack in place. And that's pretty much it, reassembled, albeit roughly reassembled, to give you an idea of how it goes together. So what I'm going to do, the one final piece, let me just help myself to these from over here. The one final piece we've got to go on here are the gaiters or boots with a pair of clips, one for each end, that then tidy up the end of the track rod end. So I've got a new one of those. So I think the sensible thing to do is for me to reassemble that as demonstrated, give it a good clean, oil everything or grease everything up on the inside on the rack before I put it together, and then we'll have another piece to add to the front subframe, and we've made progress on the front suspension. This may be a ridiculous camera angle, not sure, giving it a try. I have it's heavy now. I've reassembled, as discussed on the bench, I've reassembled the steering rack. So I'm going to attach this to the car. Everything's tight, so it is as it should be. Basically, it goes on there. So first of all, let's line up. Oh, I think I'm shoving you about with a steering rack. Camera tripod's been bashed about. Bear with me. We should be able. There, I think that's the locating point. Right, that's a start. Don't know if my head's completely in the way now, but this was a bit of a nightmare to assemble, to be fair. Nothing interesting to watch, but getting the gaiters on was a nightmare. I suspect it was largely a nightmare because it's so cold in here that the rubber was almost solid. Well, not solid, I'm just moaning. But it won't have been helped by the fact that it's Baltic. However, it's on now, and if you can see what I can see, this appears to be lining up nicely. Bolts in. So these bolts, which are got flanges on them, and therefore don't require a washer. Well, they didn't have a washer when they came off, so they're not getting a washer going back on. I'll still disassemble this, I think, and never as easy as you think, because it's something not quite right there. Maybe over tighten the other one to start with. So I think, yeah, as I say, I'll disassemble this rack when the tap and die arrive, and just run a tap and die down the bolt and into the hole, because I can't see for the life of me why the original bolts don't fit. And when things like that happen, it usually suggests to me I've got something wrong. So better to err on the side of caution. I'm making a meal of this, bear with me. I think the thing to do is to resort to the hand tools if necessary. Not a major fan of the old air or battery powered tools. I just think you get a better feel with a spanner, but having said that, it's gone in eventually. And I guess it does save you time, although how much time I've just saved there is interesting, isn't it? Probably bugger all. So let's just tweak these up now. Not super tight to start with. Same here. So these have gone right in and they're M12s, even though the originals wouldn't. Okay. Again, they're tight, but not torqued, because it may well be coming off. So you get the gist. Let me just turn that. Now, keep that out of the way. Yeah, so working. The gaiters, don't know how many turns there is to a full turn on the rack, but the gaiter is almost pulling the rack back in. I guess that's because they're brand new. Cool. Right, so without further ado, let's get the tripod moved and we'll offer up the front shock absorber because I think we're on the right lines, making progress. We've had a delivery from the postman, so the die and the two taps, one is a whole bottom tap and the other one just a standard tapered cutting tap. They've arrived, so we can basically clean out the holes for the steering rack. In addition to that, I had to order and purchase this spring compressor. I dismantled one of the Bilstein shocks for two reasons really: to reposition the top and to give it a clean. And now I can't get the bloody thing back together again. So hence the spring compressors. It only popped off with what I thought was very little pressure, but obviously there's more pressure than you think. Now, let me turn you round because we've got some, I say problems, just things to resolve. This shock, which is the one that I've taken apart, will come to when I've tried to clean out the threads in the steering rack. The two bolts that I used here in the steering rack, these are the originals back in again. Can you see that? Can if I get my hand out of the way? The two originals are back in, although they don't go in properly, hence the taps, because I've temporarily mounted the rear shocks, which are fine, all fit well, but the bolts that go in here on both sides were the two that I'd used in the steering rack. So I've had to dismantle them, take them out of the steering rack, use them here where they're meant to be. So I'm piecing together what went where bit by bit. So I think the thing to do now is put you on to the tripod, which we've just passed, bring you around to the steering rack. We'll whip this off quickly and see if we can't run a thread through those two holes, run a tap through those two threads, see if we can get that to fit using its original hardware. Okay, here we are again. So let's just nip out, buzz out. They say buzz out, don't they? I don't know why. I suppose it makes a buzzing noise. Let's just whip out these bolts. One. Excuse the tractor behind if you can hear that. Making a racket on a Saturday afternoon. Right, these two are fine. Although I don't suppose it'd do any harm just to run the tap through those as well. So this now should be loose. Yeah. Just pop that down on the floor. So here, This is the new tap that's arrived. It's a bit of cutting oil. So let's see. A little bit of resistance, so I guess it could be cutting and cleaning out something. I've also bought the die, so if this doesn't do it, there's definitely some friction there. Run this in and out more than once, I think, just to give it. Obviously, this is a well, not obviously, but it is a 1.25 pitch, which I didn't have in my arsenal. You'll notice my arms have turned blue, so the continuity announcers amongst you will realise it's a different day. You'll probably realise that anyway, because the postie's been. So apologies if it looks like an episode of Crossroads. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. I got that phrase from Ralphie Customs. If you don't watch that channel, you should. The man's a genius. He makes custom motorbike frames. Well, more than just frames, really. Turn his hand to pretty much anything. I'm a regular viewer. Not for the under 16s. He's a little bit, what's the word? He's hilarious, but and a genius. But he does swear from time to time. So be aware. Actually, I'm going to clean that with something a bit better than that, because I don't want that to go back in. But it's cleaned out a fair bit of rubbish. So before we use that for anything else, I could just try one of these big bolts through there. See if that's made a difference. Hopefully we can go straight. Look at that. Yeah, that just wasn't happening before. Excellent. So let's try another one. Those two are superfluous to requirements now. Let's run it through the bottom one, which I think may well bring out the same amount of shite as we got out. You can't say that on YouTube, can you? It may well bring out the same amount of detritus that the top one did. Don't want to thread it on the way in. It's not a machine tap, this, it's a hand tap, so you've got to back it off every half a turn or so. I guess to break you're breaking the burr? I suppose you are. Yeah, you can feel it break it actually. I think the difference is with a machine tap, which is really for a lathe, I suppose. It breaks the burr as it goes. Which does beg the question, doesn't it? Why don't you just buy machine taps and you could go straight in? I don't know, Paul. Sorry, viewers, you appear to be listening to a man talking to himself. Anyway, there we are. So we're through again with this one. Knocking the ratchet off. Yeah, you can feel that now. It's through and it's smooth. So let's have that out. Look at that, perfect. I think while I'm here, it makes absolute sense to run it through these two as well. So you don't need to watch me do that. So I'll clean these two out, put the steering rack back on, bolt it up, and we can turn our attention to the suspension. Back in place. Let's nip these up and make sure all is well. Yeah, right to the bottom of that one. I think it was just a combination of chassis paint and probably a little bit of rust in there, although the whole subframe, it's been shot blasted as well, so there could have been a bit of sand and all sorts in there in fairness, but that seems to have done the trick. So we're now using original hardware. It's in good and solid. Let's just nip it up again. I think this is not its final time in terms of attaching it to the subframe. So I will nip them up tight, but not torque them, for reasons I've explained before. And we can move around the corner to this front passenger side suspension, and I'll show you the fun and games we're having there. Job done. I've dismantled this shock absorber purely just to clean under the spring, really. I say clean it, give it a wipe. They were a couple of £100 as I've mentioned on eBay, so they're not state-of-the-art shocks, but they're absolutely perfect for what I want to do here. Now, the issue I've got is that when this spring seat was set up, I've got the actual top mount already bolted into there, and it's twisted slightly, because if it wasn't twisted, this can sit in there. Now it needs a rubber on it, and I may well find on eBay hopefully some new rubbers. These are past the first flush of youth, but when that goes back up in there like so, I can actually turn this now in the seat, in the top seat, because it needs to turn in order to meet that bottom arm. When it wasn't turned, so when I couldn't turn it because of the locating bolts at the top, it was like that, so it wouldn't go in properly. So for two reasons: A, to clean it, and B, to reposition it in its shoe at the top on a slight angle, I've been able to get it to fit. Now it just needs reassembling. However, as you know from previous clips, when this is in place, that central arm, sack the juggler here, let me see if I can put that down. This central arm, when it's in there, that is fouling on the shock. So, basically again, that's fouling on the shock. So it needs modifying. Or does it? Because when I bought this whole kit from Stuart at MEV, Stuart Much at MEV, not to be confused with Stuart Mills, who designed the Exocet, amongst many other things that he's designed, all prototypes, not rip-offs of not replicas of other cars, but bespoke, unique designs of his own. He's always sold them on, though, to other people like Stuart Much, and never really had much of an attempt, from what I can make out, of selling them himself. I'd like to meet the guy, I've never met him. Anyway, I'm rambling. So back to the job in hand. However, when I bought the kit from Stuart Much at MEV, I was half tempted to build a kind of off-roader. Living here in the middle of the North York Moors, there's grass growing out the central white lines on most roads, so it's fairly rough, and this is a low-slung Exocet really, so I thought, well, why not put a lift kit on it and maybe some chunky tyres. So I do have a lift kit that works with, it doesn't actually give you any more suspension travel, but I think what it does is bolt into there to lift the bottom of the shock, which in theory would then, I think, potentially improve the angle of the shock, which means it may no longer foul this cross member. But there's only one way to find that out, isn't there? So what I'm going to do is I'll go and dig out the lift kit. I'm not sure I want to use a lift kit in hindsight, because I'm now veering on the side of tracking this particular car, because it's got a full roll cage and it's not a bad place to learn in terms of tracking things. In which case the lift kit isn't going to help, because I'll have to remove it, and when I remove it I'll have to cut this middle section out. But for now, let's offer it up and see if it makes any difference, because it would help us make the car into a rolling chassis, even if we've got to replace and or modify this at a later date. So I'll go and get the lift kit, see what you think. Here is said kit. It's from Paco Motorsport over in the States. Although it was supplied to me, as I said, by Stuart Much at MEV. Put that there. What you get for your money is effectively 4 of these. So where am I? Over here. 4 of these, which makes these 50 quid a piece, I guess. I almost sound like I'm complaining there, don't I? Anyway, it makes these, yes, 50 quid a piece. Now, there's a plate on them that goes towards the back, but basically, again, it fits in there like that, which raises the spring seat by, I don't know, what's that, 100 mil, 110 mil, 120 mil, maybe something like that. So, in order to fit them, by doing that, of course, that means the arm here will be lower, not higher. Is that going to improve the state of play or make it worse? I don't know. Let's give it a try, shall we? So there's 4, obviously, 2 for the front, 2 for the back. The bolt down in there, that's the third fixing for the ball joint, needs to come out and goes through that hole there. So they're quite well designed, quite well thought through. There's another bolt that then goes through there, which has been supplied, so all the hardware comes with it. Voila. And that should go, it won't go through there because the bolt's in the way. So I think we should start to get on with it and stop waffling. Right. In here, you just nip that out then. Take that out. Told you all these things will be coming out. There's no need to talk them up. So, that comes out of there. This is a new bolt in here anyway because it came with the new ball joint. Do an extension really. Although now we've got that far, then it's all nice and smooth. And obviously somebody with a bit of foresight has put a bit of anti-seize compound on this bolt. So that's made it easy to get out again. Not that it would have rusted up in the time it's been there. Talking tosh. Right, so if that goes in there, that goes in there. That should, with the plate towards the back according to the instructions. That should go in there, but before I tighten that up fully, these then should work with it. Oh yeah, okay. Good bit of length on them, more length than you need really, I think. And then that is a nylock. So let's get that bolted back in. Now that we know that cross bolt fits. Should have had an extension on there. It's going to take forever without one. Talk amongst yourselves. Back in the room. So, with an extension, this is going to be a lot easier. There we go. So nip that up in there. Which will position that. Nip this up here. Too big. What do we need? Probably another 19mm, I guess. I'm actually wondering whether this whole scenario with the lift kit is actually going to make it better or worse. I think it's going to make it worse because it will exacerbate the angle and make it foul even more on the top control arm. Maybe I should have investigated that more before we put it in. But if nothing else, it'll help someone who's thinking about buying a Paco lift kit for an Exocet to see how it works before they part with 200 quid of their hard-earned money. Right, so that's basically that. This then fits in here snugly, but nevertheless it fits. And that fits in there. I think that's made it even worse, hasn't it? Realistically. Or has it? Has it pushed that out further? Let's fit this. Let's fit, if I can get that to go in there, and I can. Let's fit this back in. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Unscrew that. Put that where it belongs. In there. And just that finger tight. So what I'm trying to do here, of course, is go through there. I mean, that just doesn't fit in a million years, does it? Up into there. fouling more than Vinnie Jones, this, isn't it? So, well, I haven't quite got it in the right place. And there doesn't seem an easy way of doing so. How are we doing? Well, I would say that has almost fixed it. Yeah, I would say that's almost fixed it. So I think maybe the thing... Oh, hang on. No, it's even worse, isn't it? Because that now is completely under there. So, not to worry, that hasn't worked. But we don't know until we try. The whole point of this channel is that we're learning how to build. We're learning how to build cars. And we've just learnt that whichever way I look at it, this arm needs modifying. So I think I'm going to stop trying to shove a square peg in a round hole, accept that that needs modifying, take it off again, mount the shock without it, which will hold up this bottom arm, take the Paco lift kit off and use that another day, or save that for another day. And I think we can move on to compressing and reassembling this front shock in the right orientation to work with the two holes in the top of the frame, which are an immovable feast, and the bottom bracket, which again is an immovable feast. So join me in a moment over at the workbench and we'll reassemble the shock. I've got you quite close in here, so hopefully I don't knock you over, but you can see what I've done. I've basically attached the spring compressors and wound them down. You can do a fair bit by hand, and then the last bit, I like to be in control really, so I've done it with a hand spanner. A hand spanner. That's the cap. So hopefully now, let's have a look. Apologies if I'm getting your way, but this is a bit of a nightmare. Right, so if we put the rubber on with the used or knackered part, like that, round where it's probably going to get less grief. I think it's just pinched in the top bit there. So I'll turn it round. Probably get some new ones of these without too much hassle, hopefully. That then fits in there, into the spring seat. And hopefully there's enough now poking out to get the cap on, which goes that way. So that rubber fits in there. Oh, got a little bit left. Blimey. See if I can get this on. I don't want to tighten them down much further. Yeah, we're in. We're in. So, that then, are you following me? That should be able to, oh yeah, I can tighten that down. So once that's come through enough for me to feel comfortable, and I can offer up the other rear shock, front shock, just to see how much poke through I need. I'll just replicate what was on the other one. The reason, by the way, that I dismantled this, I think I've said this already, was just so that without the spring on, you can get in here and just clean the body of the shock. They're not in their first flush of youth, and I'm not anticipating necessarily using them forever. But for the moment, they'll do a job. And as I say, got, you know, their original Bilstein shock absorbers that were 200 quid on eBay, 50 quid a corner. Bargain when you consider what I paid for the Paco Motorsport lift kit. Have I moaned about that once already? Yeah, I think I have. You'd think I'd begrudge paying the 200 quid, wouldn't you? You would indeed. Anyway, so there we are. Let me just see if I can readily lay my hand on the other one. No, I can't. Oh, yeah, I can. That's the other one. Yeah. So, how much stick through have we got once the lock nut's on? Not a million miles away, I don't think, are we? A little bit more to go down. That's wobbling. I suppose it would though, because it's on the rubber. Let's keep going. To put it back. I don't suppose for a minute. Is this giving it preload? I suppose it would be. It's not quite an adjustable shock, but I guess the more you wind this top bit down, the more preload you're putting on the spring. Anyway, there we are. I'm going to lock those two together as per before I dismantle them. The bottom spring's sitting where it should, the top is where it should be. So now we could take the easy way, couldn't we, and undo this using the drill. Little bit, that's loose pretty much. Of course the tension's been taken up now by the nuts on the top. Pull that out, there we go. So a handy little gadget, I have to say. Now what are we doing here? Going that way. Do it by hand once the tension's off. Pull that out. Pull that out. And it's stuck. So how do we get that off? There we go. Right. So there we have a rebuilt shock now that isn't dirty any longer. So should be able to take that over to the car, offer it up. Look, I've re-kinked it. Offer it up, and it should at least support the bottom arm. So from there, we can work out what to do with that top arm. So this now, I've adjusted the angle of that top plate. That was the whole purpose. Well, one of the purposes, apart from giving it a quick wipe. So that fits in there, and I can now drop the washer and the nut, flange nut, on top, thereby, by hand at least, securing it in place. So that's one, two of them on. Hopefully I'm not in your way. You can see what's going on. This is all happening above the car, so you probably can't, but it's two nuts. I'm sure you can imagine two nuts. Now, that one's tightened, and they're just hand tight at the moment, but it's holding it. This is now in, well, hopefully it is. Let's have a look. Yeah. Now in the right orientation to fit in there. Previously it was turned, or turned that way, can't remember which. And now we should have enough. I'll be close enough, because there's a bit of movement in the rubber obviously, to line this up and get a bolt in. About to find out, aren't we? Let's have a look. Oh yeah, all right, okay, that's in. So, with that in there, what next? Oh, I'm getting excited because it worked. Hang on, just nip this top one up. That's tight, oh, you know, tight. Tight but not taut. Why? Because it's all coming out. But it'll have to come out this, of course, because I've got to get that top wishbone, control arm, call it what you will. So there, firm. This is a refurbished, again, so it'll run on the wire wheel. All right, we're in. So a run on the wire wheel and some copper slip anti-seize on it. So I wonder if that's the same bolt, same size. No. What about that one? Is it a 19, 17? 17, get in. Except, of course, I don't have another 17 here. So to nip that up, I'll need to nip and get a 17, but let's do that so that we can finally, at least for now, have that suspended roughly where it's meant to go. Not sure whether that bolt should have gone in that way or in the other way. But as it's fairly temporary, not going to worry too much at the moment. Most things seem to go in where the nut is at the back. I don't know if that's because it gets less of the weather if it's protected from the back. Who knows? That. Going in. Will it nip up eventually? I guess it will. Is it meant to? Guess it is. Right, so we're in. Now that misses round there as well, although they do say on the build forum, you should maybe take a bit off that lip. I have done that, but maybe not enough. Not sure. And Now we all know the problem with this arm, but what I've brought down to show you is what I've been referring to as the banana bar. So in theory what you do is bolt that on there, which means you can then cut out this bit that's showing. So I guess we could do that, weld it, bolt it, effectively make the hole bigger, which then stops this fouling on the shock. So I just don't like that idea. But maybe it's a temporary fix. If we've got to weld that, then maybe shouldn't have put the bushings in yet, although I could push them out again. And certainly I haven't put in the other ball joint, because that's got rubber in it, and if we are going to weld that in as well as bolt it, I would rather get all the welding done first. So you can see what I can see. I think we're progressing. That's for another day. We can cross that bridge another day. It just remains for me to go around the other 4 corners doing pretty much the same thing. We got the steering rack in today, so we're making progress. Just for completeness, I'm going to show you what I did here at the back. It's very similar and very simple. 2 nuts in the top holding the shock. You bring up the bottom suspension arm, which in this case is a single bolt that goes through the shock. Somehow, shock goes into that position there, bolt goes in there, and then there's an actual threaded sleeve on the other side of the shock, which the bolt goes into. Again, it's a refurbished bolt. We just nip this up somehow. There we are. There we go. And then the bottom arm bolted there. 2 nuts on the top. Job's a good one. Please click the like button, subscribe for more content of this nature. Join me again on the next one.